Hello and welcome to Nurture Small Business. When was the last time you made a bad hiring decision? Today, that is what we're going to talk about, and more specifically, how to avoid making a bad hiring decision. It is definitely a continuation of the conversation we started in my last podcast about role development. In that podcast, you may recall how I shared a story about being chosen for a part in a play that I really was not qualified for. I was chosen simply because of my height. And in business, you don't want to make hiring decisions that way. As a business owner, you want to ensure that when you have a need to hire, that you are hiring based on the skills that you need within your organization and the ability of that person that you're interviewing to impact your organization in a positive way. So, why do so many people hire and insert really kind of oddball questions into their interview? There's the curveball or the brain teaser or something quirky. And I honestly believe it's because they deem that it's creative or it might break through the ice. And while that might be partially true, I don't buy into those types of questions because they aren't effective. And I have a better way of getting beyond those rehearsed answers that you get and really getting into the details. So, diving a little deeper into this role development, because when you need to hire, you want to ensure the person is a fit for your company and you want to reduce the risk of investing both your time and your money in a poor hiring choice. And I can tell you from experience that a poor hiring choice can create a lot of extra work and a lot of extra stress. In my team, we like to be kind, and while kindness is not exclusive of making hard decisions, it does make it a little bit more challenging sometimes because sometimes as we're giving a person the benefit of the doubt, we're really stretching out a time frame of poor performance. We believe in upskilling and training people and really trying to give them the benefit of the doubt. And we've had to rely also on data to support us when we've had to make those tough decisions. Like I said, tough decisions are not exclusive of kindness. You can still be kind to someone when you're even having to let them go and rely on that data to explain your decision. We have come up with a system for hiring that is very much based on Who, which is the book Who, the Method of Hiring by Jeffrey Smart and Randy Street. I do highly recommend it. The challenge is that their book, while everything in there is extraordinarily phenomenal, it is geared towards larger companies. So larger companies that are recruiting middle or senior management levels or whole division leaders or, just in companies that have hundreds of employees. It doesn't work so well for a small company. And to be honest with you, we all work with small companies. At least I do, and the people I know do for the most part. We've also added a bit of our own pizzazz to it to make it work for the smaller companies. And these companies, when I say smaller companies, they might be a solopreneur that's getting ready to make their first hire, or a small company with maybe like 10 employees. The method in the Who book will not work for those scenarios. And so the system that I advocate incorporates 5 different pieces. We're going to go over the outcomes and competencies completely today. We won't go over everything. The first is, of course, the outcomes and competencies, and that is the basis of the role development. Then you create an interviewing score sheet, the job ad, and the job description. And before you ask, they are not the same thing. The job description reads a little bit boring, has a lot more detail. The job ad is a marketing piece. And who are you marketing to in this case? You're marketing to potential candidates. And you want to create it in a way that attracts the right candidates to your company. The 5th item, like I said, we added our own little pizzazz, And that is the critical skills matrix. I don't think we'll have time to get into that today. That this is an exciting thing and a great way to really tie all of this together. So when you get ready to make this journey down the role development role, the first thing, as I mentioned, to create is your outcomes and competencies. Let's get them defined. I gave one example in last month's podcast for a business development person. Today, I'm going to give a much more detailed explanation for a social media coordinator role. I'm going to break it down into what success looks like in my company. I'm going to keep it simple. We focus on results first and then the behaviors that help deliver them. The behaviors are largely in the competencies. So outcomes first. 3 to 5 is what I recommend. And I believe that the WHO book also recommends about that much, that many rather. Yeah, use proper grammar. So this is what we have in our outcomes for a social media coordinator role. First item, maximize the client's social media presence. In plain terms, that means consistent, engaging posts that support the client's goals and not just posting to be posting. Outcome 2, translate client goals into creative output. So the goals, and turn that into content, which is copy, graphics, or videos, and make sure that it aligns with their brand and their strategy, not just the brand. Outcome 3, apply platform best practices and stay current. I'm sure you all are aware social media, anything digital marketing, digital media changes so quickly. And so we expect the candidates to keep up because we expect our employees to keep up. That way, they're able to give relevant content recommendations to reflect what's working in that moment. Outcome 4, use data and analytics to guide decisions. And we want to make sure they keep this within the scope of the client's agreement and look for trends, identify what's resonating in their account, recommend adjustments that support the goals which have been agreed upon. Outcome 5, contribute to client retention. Every single one of your employees can contribute to client retention. Strong results matter, but so does the experience. Clear communication and steady follow through help keep clients confident and satisfied, which supports retention. I think every role should have that in there. These outcomes, they reflect what we want and what we need in that social media coordinator role. And now that you've got the outcomes and have a good set of examples so you can develop your own, let's talk about the competencies. So these are more about behaviors and strengths that help a candidate consistently deliver on the outcomes that you have. A few examples, things that you might want to put in your outcomes, competencies, proactivity, resourcefulness, professional, clear and concise communication, ability to work with minimal supervision, deadline-oriented, detail-oriented, and the list goes on. These are just a few examples of what you could potentially have in your list of competencies. We recommend having between 6 and 10 competencies for each role. And if you get beyond 10, it becomes too expansive and exhausting and overwhelming. Less than 6 might not be enough. You might be able to get away with 5, but 6 to 10 is the sweet spot. You'll also want to put a small description of what that means to you. So there is no misalignment with what something means. And I assure you, you put 2 people in a room and you say proactivity, what does that mean? They're going to define it differently. Likewise, with different roles, proactivity is going to look different. So business development and sales, when you say proactivity, it may show up as cultivating relationships, which is a step beyond just logging your work in a CRM. Okay, and that can be accomplished in a variety of ways. For an executive assistant, it would be calendar management, avoiding conflicts, and when a conflict arises, solving it without having to get input from the CEO they're serving. That would be proactivity for us. So how we actually describe proactivity in competencies, because this is one of ours, we described it as being resourceful and solution-oriented, communicate early, flag risks before they become urgent, and keep things moving without needing a constant push. That's one example that shows clear outcomes backed by clear competencies. And I realize I only gave you one of our competencies, though I gave you some examples of others that you could choose. And if you keep these in front of you, you have basically your roadmap that keeps you focused on the results you want and the behaviors you need. And so you have a solid compass, solid guide to get what you are looking for through your interviews. I can tell you when we first started diving into this book and these activities, we got really clear on what we needed our team members to do, but not at first. After we kicked this around for a while, we came up with some pretty poor competencies. We realized some of our outcomes were written with words like expertise in or proficiency with. And expertise and proficiency, while it is absolutely needed, these are not action verbs. Expertise is about knowledge. Proficiency is by itself vague and interpreted quite differently from both the candidate and the hiring manager. I've had folks who have told me they were proficient on things that, when I asked them to explain more, they were at beginner level. So we just, an example is Microsoft Word. I've had people tell me they were proficient, and when I asked about certain things, they weren't able to do a mail merge or table of contents. And that's one of the reasons we do working interviews as well, to validate what they tell us they can do. So it's very important that your outcomes start with action verbs. And all of our outcomes that I shared with you earlier for the social media coordinator role started with action verbs: maximize, translate, apply, use, and contribute. Those were the words those statements started with. So I know I've given you a lot of information. I don't want to overwhelm you, so we're going to probably break this off here shortly, and hopefully I'll have a follow-up podcast, but I wanted to leave you with this. You might be wondering right now how you even get started, and this is what we did. We asked our team members, tell me what you do in your role. Okay, we got a few weird looks. I mean, we did hire them after all. And then we rephrased that to ask them what were the top three to five things they do for their clients. This got the ball rolling and gave us the basis we needed to capture that information and develop it into our existing outcomes and competencies. Now, this document that you create for the outcomes and competencies, it is a living, breathing document, much like your standard operating procedures in your company. And I do hope you have standard operation procedures. They need to be reviewed and updated on a regular basis. The next step after your outcomes and competencies are developed is to take what you have and replicate it and add a scoring chart to it. Well, we can go into that a little bit more in detail later. And basically, this is your scoring, and you want to be 90% confident that they can do, remember an action verb, do what you've outlined in your outcomes, and that they match your competencies. Now, how do you get this information to begin with? That comes from your interview. And by learning and honing your skills at getting beyond the practice answers that the candidates give you is how you will get it. Who, the book, clearly goes into that style of interview and gives great prompts for you to use. They also have some really incredibly revealing answers they've received from candidates to support why you would do this. When rolling this out, our leadership team, we actually role played to practice asking the open-ended questions to get beyond the answers that they rehearsed. And while we were still rolling this out, one of the interviews that I did, and I was not adept at doing this at this point, and I still say that I'm still learning The candidate was for the social media coordinator role that we talked about earlier. And they were checking all the boxes. I really like this individual. And a discussion near the end of the interview came up about metrics and how their work has impacted their employer. And they said, yes, the social media has improved sales, has improved performance. And I continued to ask the probing questions. What things did you try that were different? What metrics did you look at? What did the metrics look like at the start and after the improvement was noted? And they just kept going back to how improvement performance increased and sales increased. And finally, they admitted that they did not monitor analytics. So there was no performative data to support what they were saying. Does that mean they were lying? Not necessarily. However, keep in mind, one of our outcomes was to make data-informed decisions. So this is one very small example of how asking those open-ended probing questions can uncover details that may impact your hiring decision. Without discovering that, I am positive I would have hired that person. So stay tuned for more on how to adjust this interview style to fit your business, as well as some upcoming workshops where we'll dive into this and do the work on your business to create this. And share your hiring conquests with me. I'd love to hear them. Thank you for joining me today at Nurture Small Business.